Hello everyone. First of all, sound check. Can you hear me clear? Please write something in chat if you can hear me. Okay, good. Well, if something could wrong with sound, let me know, as I said in previous presentation. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about the game design in general, but mostly about the game design of hyper-casual games, and especially we will talk about the process of how to collect the metrics in game development of hyper-casual games and why it's important to understand these metrics. So first of all, I would say that game could be represented in different ways. For my personal opinion, for example, game could be split by different parts. As this is just the theory of game design, the basic theory. We can split the game on gameplay by themselves, what we playing on, our visual, sound, story, and I think it's important question also to mention the platform. When you're playing on the PlayStation, for example, you have a gamepad in your hands, and the feeling how you play the game, it's really totally different when you're playing it on the mouse with the keyboard. And as a good example, we often have a special after aiming algorithms that we use for PlayStation games, especially for shooters, but we don't use them for PC games due to the more better accuracy in aiming processing. So that's why the platform is also important part of the game, as well for the mobile games, as well for the hyper casual games, and I will describe you later maybe some details what is special about the mobile game development in the hyper casual field. So another way to look at the game, it's MDA framework. The MDA framework this is the thing that actually scientific people used, which could be split according to the naming. It's mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. So if we'll try to connect the principles that was on the previous slides, mechanics is something that we play in or the game do something. It's some action. So dynamics it's how these rules apply to the player, and how players use those rules. And also maybe dynamic could be say that, for example, if we have a rule in our game and one of the rules is the speed of our game, so the dynamic is it's all about the speed in our games that we have. For example, according to dynamic, chess game is pretty stochastic, pretty slow, but if we take some action shooter game, there are much more action in case of dynamics, so that's why we can say that the dynamic is different for the chess and for the shooter game. And the last one is aesthetic. Is here we actually combine the visual of the game, the feelings that we have according to the gameplay, and the sound and other things that are related to according to our feelings and our thoughts about the game. So this is pretty useful if you want to work in this in the scientific sphere of game development. So I would say that you should know the MDA framework, how it's applied. There are a bunch of different articles related to game development in this field, so you can just write MDA framework or click on the link here, and you will find all information how it's applied to the game development. And another pretty close thing that you can find in the book, The Art of Game Design. It's this division by mechanics, which is really close to MDA. It's aesthetic. So by that we can also could mean the visual and the sound of the game. Technology, which is pretty close to the platform and maybe sometimes to the dynamics in some cases, because it's pretty different how to play on mobile, on PC, or console game. And also the art of game design, saying that the story could be split from aesthetic side of the question, and this is kind of true because sometimes we could have aesthetic in the game but don't have a direct story. On the next slides, I want to show you how, according to this last scheme, we can analyze the game design of the hyper casual games. So first of all, it's important to mention that, for example, for the story, this is a simple one because we often don't have a story in the hyper casual games. Not all of these games are actually hyper casual games. For example, Homescape is more casual games. It's even the specific genre. It's much free games, and the story is pretty strong here. and it's the same for Minecraft, of course, but Sandballs, Fun Race, Hoop Stars, maybe Coty Cross, Color Fill, and Mr. Bullet and Traffic Run, Aquapark.io, it's all the hyper casual games. We can't say that there is some specific story, but in general we can say that there is something that could tell us the story. For example, for Mr. Bullet, we can think that this is some kind of the agent who trying to kill his enemies. So this is already a story that the developer provide to the customer, who also trying to associate himself with the player, with their character. And so even if we think that there is no story in hyper casual games, there actually is, and this story usually development from the customer side, and developers do not try to provide it to the customer, but the customer just trying to find the information about the world where the hyper casual game is going on. And the same example for the aquapark.io, where we playing actually in real aquapark. So this is kind of their place that has a story in this case. Of course, a lot of different hyper casual games just all about some simple and not even usually don't have a direct story like Color Fill 3D, but in general we could say that some story related things we have even in hyper casual games. The next thing is the mechanics, of course. It's something that we can call in specific way how we play the game. This is an example, Tomb of the Mask. It's a hyper casual game from the Plain Generic company. It's not a typical hyper casual game because it was developed really a lot of time ago. I think 5 years or more. For the hyper casual fields, that's really a lot of time. So, and here we can actually even can give a name of this mechanics, and the scientists usually call it avoidance. And if you will Google, if you Google MDA framework, you can find information about the names of different mechanics in the game development field. So the avoidance you can find in this list. As well, I can actually share with you later a link that where I have all of the not all maybe, but a lot of different names of different mechanics that is used in the scientific world to define the process of the gameplay. Speaking about the technology side of the question on here, just to remind you, we have also the technology, which could be a platform or something else. For hyper casual game development field, it's really important to have a specific size of their application. This is kind of the important thing for the hyper casual games, because as much more size of your game in hyper casual on hyper casual market, as less chance that it will be downloaded and played by the players, and this is actually increase the cost of the promotion of your game, and it's much more it's cost much more for you to involve a player in your game when the size of your application is too large. So this is one of the part of the question. We use the technology to optimize the size of the application, and another part of the question that on mobile market we usually on the hyper casual market, often people at the beginning, when they started to develop some games for the hyper casual market, think that it will be a really cool feature to use accelerometer of the mobile phone to turn it in a different side, but it's actually not. And a lot of people develop a game in the horizontal way, and so this is also not applicable for the hyper casual games, because the trend on these games works in this way. We usually have a vertical orientation screen on the game, so this is also a part of technology, and this is also of course a part of the market, not only technology, that we should consider when we develop a game. And the last thing, of course, is visual. And in general, if we took just any hyper casual games, we can see some patterns that are really close to each of them. First of all is colors. Colors are pretty soft, it's pretty colorful, nice, and we don't have some dark colors usually here. And what is important also to mention, usually on hyper casual market, the best games that performed is the games that are 3D. Exception could be done, for example Mr. Bullet, or it has a really specific vector art style, that's why it maybe was successful. And another example, maybe it's Save the Girl and Clue Master, where you have just 2D animations, but there art of these games are just really unique, and that's why it's performed really good. But this is actually exceptions from the rule, but in the rule in general that 3D games performed much more better on hyper casual market in average. So this is what you should consider. Another thing is colors and the lighting process. When you work with Unity, you also have to understand how to work with lights and to define art style for your game that will be really snackable for the players and YouTubeable in this case. This is two things that you will learn later. So this was just a general explanation how the game design works. These rules that I told you before are applicable not only for the hyper casual games, but it's also work for the general, for any games that you can split it on this 4 or the 3 in case of MDA framework parts of the game. So you always can split it on mechanics, visual, story, and technology. And that's the information that you should consider when you're trying to develop your game. You should think about it from this 4 perspective and to build a plan of your game development according to that. Later, of course, it will be really native for you because you will not have to think about it when you have an experience. But this is the rules that works really for any game. So I want to tell you a bit about the story, about the market statistics, how the game, why hyper casual games are so popular right now. First of all, I want to point out that more than half of the market are captured by mobile games, as you see on the graph, and only a quarter of the market it's related to the console and PC games respectively. And so for the 2090 for Google Play we have more than 1.6 million applications. For the App Store 1.1 million applications, which is really a huge number because this is really competitive market. Of course, a lot of the applications, not even the games but in general applications, are not so successful. But anyway, that's the thing that we should consider. Market is big, but at the same time it's really competitive. And so every day there are more than 4,000 applications, not even applications, I can say games are released every day. So the question is how to compete in this market. If we, for example, just make a good game, and it doesn't mean that we will be successful on this market in this moment, because if every day we have four new 1,000 games, so it means that our game will not be just mentioned in any featuring processes if we will not help it. You can use, for example, different YouTube bloggers or something else. There are some examples where people where people actually just have money from organic traffic when they don't use user acquisition. So the user acquisition is the process when we promote our application with some apps. We can promote it in Facebook, and Instagram, or in any other networks, social networks, or in other games. When we play a game, we can see an ads from other games. So this is where we have money from the ads according to the hyper casual business model, but I will tell you about this later. So how it happens that hyper casual becomes so popular? First of all, for historical reasons. In some moment, Facebook and other marketing networks that promote you in ads like Iron Source and other allowed you to acquire users with very cheap and low CPI. At some moment, to acquire user was become really cheap, and not only for some specific countries, but in general in the world. So it decreased CPI. CPI is a abbreviature which means cost per install, and this is the amount of money that you have to spend to acquire one user in your game. So if we have a lower CPI, it means that to earn money from this player, we have a lower requirements for amount of money that we want to earn from this user. So this amount of money that we usually have from one user calls lifetime value. So let's give an example. If if I acquire one user at $1, so to earn money on him, I have to earn more than $1 from this user. So the amount of money that we earn is LTV. The amount of money that we spend, it's CPI. So if in general CPI decreased, it means that minimal requirement for the LTV also decreased, and so it means that the average average revenue per user that we want to earn from one user also decreased. And the same for actually for RPPU. I just want to say about the all of this. All of these things. So RPU is average revenue per user, but at RPPU it's average revenue per payment user, and there is a difference, but it's usually it's not applicable for hyper casual games. The difference that some players pay money in your game, some players are not, but we do not consider a payment users. We do not consider users who give us the money through the ads that they look on in our game as a payment. It's the difference for hyper casual market. But if you take some Homescapes game, or if you take Clash of Clans, where we have in-apps in internal purchases, then we can say that there is a payment users, and this is a part of it. So speaking about the metrics, maybe it's a bit difficult, but you will understand it later. So we have RPU and RPPU. So RPU is for the formula of RPU, it's total revenue generated during a time period divided by number of users that we have during the same time period. So we have payment users and not payment users, and this number is the sum of this number is in the division of this equation. So but RPPU it's equal to the gross, so general number of money that we have divided by the number of payment users, and this is the difference. And usually payment users is a percentage from the total number of users. And so I promised you that we have special questions, and if you answer this question right, and so you will get a pizza from me. I will order a pizza for you, so you will not have to pay for that. So the questions for that, it's when RPPU could be higher than RPU. And yes, this things is available only for the people who maybe is only the first year students, or also just joined to us, and for the people who do not answer on the who do not know answer on this question. So I know the people who know the answers. I know the people who are already in who studied in Innopolis University on the second year and later. So if you're the first year students, this is a good opportunity for you to answer the question. You can answer it in chat, in Indie Game Dev Club chat, or here on YouTube channel. No, it's not actually. So yeah, the question is, it's a tricky question, so maybe you cannot answer on this right now, but I will repeat it in chat, so you will have an opportunity to answer on it. Let me give me just a minute. Okay, so let's go further. I will answer on your if you ask something according to this question during the presentation, I will answer on it later, so you will have an opportunity to hear my feedback on this. So in general, as I said, if we require lower CPI for the user, so it means we need a lower LTV, and our formula that shows us that we are happy, it's actually when our lifetime value from one user is more than number of money that we have to spend on one user. CAC, it's actually this kind of the same as CPI, customer acquisition cost, how much money do we spend to acquire a user. But if the formula in average is opposite, it means that we spend money but do not earn anything. So in general, historically, in modern moment when the CPI has become really low requirements to RPU, so in this moment we do not need enough internal purchases to earn money on the people. So it means that RPPU in this moment to become 0, and so the question becomes how to earn money with this lower CPI, and the answer was to have an ads inside our game that we show to the people, because in general ads give you much less money than internal purchases, but for internal purchases you should acquire a really high quality audience that could be used for the future payments in your application. So in this moment when the CPI has become really low, so we can earn money on the ads, and that's why there is a specific key metrics that the publishers usually have on hyper casual markets. So there is a different type of test to understand the KPIs of your game. One of them is CTR, click-through rate. If you make some gameplay video of your game, like 15 or 30 seconds, you just making an really you just make a nut company when you don't have when you don't even have a game, and you just testing is the people like your game, do they want to click, and if this number of clicks per number of users that see your ads it's more than 5%. So in case of mail, for example, they paid you $2,000, but in general, if you have more than 5%, it means your game really have a really good chance to be successful. Then there is a CPI test, the cost per install. You're just making a small game and you trying to understand, or maybe even not a game, just a build with one level and with a video of your gameplay. And if the CPI is lower than maybe 20 cents, maybe or something like that, your game will be published. For Voodoo, for example, your game will be published for Voodoo if the CPI for your game is lower than 30 cents. And this is actually a number for the USA market on iOS usually. But it depends on the publisher. So if you have a CPI lower than this value, so some publishers promote you some amount of money, but except this amount of money, they also publish your game. So this is one of their some of them are really cool, have really cool things to promote to you when you work with publishers. So, but it's much more cooler when your game is published with the publisher. So another important metrics, it's retention. Retention day 1, retention day 7, which is usually shown like RD1 or R1 or retention day D1. So it's a number of players that return on the next day after install. If I install your game today and return in your game tomorrow to play again, so I will be in the group of the people who returned in your game. And here, for example, for the my games, if your retention day 1 is more than 45%, so your game will be successful as they think. And retention day 7, it's number of people who comes to your game on the day 7, and so it means they played every day in the 7 days. I just want to promote to say you here that why this metric is so important. As much more people return to your game, as much more ads they see, as much more money you earn, and that's how it helps to increase your LTV according to your CPI. So lower CPI, much more better for your much more cheaper to acquire a player. As much more retention, more money you earn on these players. So for example, for the retention test, your CPI should be at this moment lower than 25 cents, and retention should be more than 40%, and the retention day 7 more than 30%. But again, different publishers have a different KPIs. And the last maybe important metric that you should consider is return of investments. It's in general, in percentages, how much more money you earn. So if I spend $100 for user acquisition and get $130, then my ROI is 130%. So the ROI should be, of course, greater than 100. In other case, you just lose the money. So for the good ROI, my games pay you this amount of money. My games is a part of Mail.ru, by the way. And yeah, you also have 60% revenue from your published game, and you still have intellectual property for your game. This is just an example. You can also check the different conditions for the Voodoo or Azure games or any other publisher. So the conclusion in general, your game should have retention as high as possible, and retention is something that is defined by the engagement of your core mechanic. Retention is also it's actually all about the engagement of your core mechanic. It's about how you play the game. So lower CPI is defined by attractiveness of your gameplay. It's defined by their video of your games that you use for promotion, and so your game should be YouTubeable and snackable and beautiful in visual cases to in case if you want to have a low CPI. But to keep the players, you need a good gameplay. So to make this happen, your gameplay should be easy to read and easy to play. Usually it should have some kind of innovative mechanic. Of course, there are a lot of different games and it's hard to develop an innovative game, but there maybe the mixing of different mechanics will help you to build something new and unique in this case. And sometimes it's important to develop a trend, because, for example, at some moment when the Johnny Trigger was published, in some period of time it was really popular to make a shooters, and actually CPI for the shooters becomes much more lower. And so that's why sometimes you have to see the trend in the current cases on the in the hyper casual market. For that, you just need to analyze not only the play market in App Store at current moment, but also to use special special sites that parse these shops, I mean App Store and Play Market, and helps you to analyze when some publisher trying to test the game. There is a specific tools for that, and it's already used for the professional hyper casual game development, and I will share it with you. And I want to shortly say about the development principle. First of all, try to make a prototype and test it by itself. In this case, you can try to redesign it, but if it's still bad, better to throw away a prototype. The hyper casual is all about to make as much more prototypes as possible, so do not hesitate to throw a not successful prototype that doesn't work. If it's good for the prototype, so develop it in MVP, test metrics. It doesn't matter as CTR. For the CTR, this is a simple one because you don't have to develop a lot. For the retention test, you have to develop a bit more, but it usually take 1 week or something like that. If MVP is bad, so maybe your idea is not so good and you have to throw it away. So in case if your metrics is better, for example, than 30 or 35% for retention day 1, and if CPI is low as well, here should be 35 cents or something like that. But if CPI low but retention is high, maybe it's not also a good game because your core mechanics is not so good, but you can try to increase it, because if it's the lower CPI, it's much more easy. Maybe you can change the gameplay but keep the visuals the same. So in general, try to develop prototype in 2-3 days for the CTR for the CTR CPI test, and for the retention tests maybe 2 weeks, no more. So the principle is research, prototype, review, throw away, research, prototype, review, throw away, and for MVP, it's important to mention no tutorial, because there is no need in tutorial in hyper casual games. If your game needs tutorial, so something go wrong. What else? Each level, usually for the hyper casual games, should be not more than 1 or 2 minutes, because actually after 1 or 2 minutes you have to show an ads in your game. That's why for the development you need to keep it in mind. By the way, at this moment, when you're just testing your game, even for retention test, you don't have to put an ads in your game, and because it will decrease the retention for retention for the player, because some players don't like an ads and they will leave your game. But this few percentage could be important for you to be published by the publisher or not. Play session in average should be 5 minutes. Longer doesn't mean bad, of course. As much more time the player play your game, so average play time, that much is better usually, because as much more play time, as much more money you earn according to the number of ads that he looks on. Usually it's proved, if you keep the principles that was described in the previous point, like 1 or 2 minutes of gameplay, the number of levels that you need for retention test is just from 6 to 12 levels, or as usually said, like 10 or 12 minutes of gameplay. So if you have a 12 minutes of gameplay in your game, it means that it will be enough for retention test. So you don't have to develop a game for with the content for 1 week. Just 10 minutes of your gameplay will be enough, and you can test it by yourself by calculating the time. And after level 12, or after 12 minutes of gameplay, you just need to loop all of the levels, start from the beginning, and usually it's really work for the retention test, and you don't have to develop more. So usually for creatives, for the videos of your gameplay you're making for different videos, which shows the core essential of your game, and is much more readable your gameplay, as better would be performance of this campaign. You have to also design for the retention test. You have to design and add analytics to understand where your players leave the game, to understand which levels are pretty bad maybe, and that's why they leave your game. And remember, and the last thing, remember 3D is always better, so try to develop in 3D. As well, I want to share with you some materials that we collected before the internship in the summer. There is a link on their docs where we have two pages with the different links for the articles related to the game design and the programming. For now, maybe you don't need the material for programming, but at least you can read these materials. Especially, I recommended Voodoo article. I think colored is a very important articles in color, in green color. So you can see it not here maybe, but in the doc. So just to try to read these materials, and you will understand much more about this market. And later, if you would like to work on the game design or hyper casual games, we can share with you the access to the Voodoo dashboard, where you can look at the different showcases of the games that was successful. Just give me a minute. White 3D is much better. So this is just a market. This is how markets work, because just the players, the statistics show that 3D games has lower CPI. That's why 3D is always better. So in average, it works in this way. And so this is just how market works. There is no any reason except the statistics. That's why the publisher usually works with 3D games. Of course, if your game has a unique art style, or if your game just has some unique mechanics that works in 2D, it could work. But in general, it's not. You just with 2D game, you will just have a really high CPI according to the statistics that exist on the market. Okay, main points according to the things that I tried to say about the game design of the games. First of all, try to keep a game simple. And doesn't mean boring, because there is a game where you have to fix, for example, clothes with iron, and so it's actually usual things that we do during the day, but the people played it and it's actually a hit game. You could be innovative. For example, check rolly legs. I really like this game because the idea of the game is just, if we have a wheel and we will attach leg to them, and at some moment we will show the legs and hide the legs, and that will be the game all of this about. It's just racing game. You can also use real life examples like perfect ironing, soap cutting, or lip art 3D. It's just, again, we are simulating the process that we usually do in our usual life, but do it in much more friendly and beautiful environment. Yeah, and remember that for hyper casual games, your audience is the people who never play games. If we draw a pyramid with their audience, we will put hardcore players on the top of this pyramid, but in the middle will be mid-core players, a bit lower casual gamers, and in the lower part of the pyramid is hyper casual players. And it's important to mention that hyper casual players will not play in some shooter game which is hardcore, but hardcore players will play some rolly legs or perfect ironing or something else. That's why hyper casual audience is really broad. That's why actually we have a lower CPI for such kind of the game. And so in this case, you should consider that if you give your game to the child, if you give your game to the grandma, or just any random person who usually don't play games, he will understand how to play your game by just looking at the video on the person gameplay or just playing it. If it is so, your game will be kind of successful if it's in case if it's understandable. starting from the beginning of the development, you should think how to promote your game, what make it unique, what make it snackable and YouTubeable in this case. So remember what Voodoo actually advises is snackability, engagement, and clearness. So snackability, it means it looks good, it looks taste. It's engagement, it means the core gameplay should be engage you and keep you inside the games that you want to return back. And the clearness, so right from the 3 or 5 seconds of video gameplay, you should understand what your game about. So for today, it's all. Speaking about the questions, there is a version RPU more than RPPU more than when not, it's not. Okay, I can give you a small hint. The point is in definitions of this definitions. Sorry, the point is to try to understand the definition of two of these things. Try to Google it, and this is a tricky question, as I said, and the right answer is not so simple actually. I mean, to understand the answer, you have to consider what are the definitions of these things. We can actually write in the chat, and in the previous time, a lot of people trying to argue and even give some different formulas, which was wrong actually. And so, in some moment, one person understood the point, and he just described what is this, why it could happen or not could happen or could happen. He just described it. So. Okay, according to the lecture, do you have any questions or not? If you want to earn a pizza, just try to write it in the chat. So RPU is almost always bigger than RPU. RPU depends on donates, RPU on all users. Okay, let's look at this example. I will show you maybe. Give me just a moment. I'm going to show you the screen. Hope you can see it. Yes, I guess. So if we have, for example, 100 users and we have $100 for some period of time, let's say 1 month, it doesn't matter, and we can say that 10% of our users is the payment users, so it means that 10 people pay something. So let's calculate our RPU, and RPU, average revenue per user, is number of money that we earn divided by number of people that we have. Average revenue per user. In general, we have 10 users, right? So it means that average revenue per user is $1. Average revenue per payment user, it's so we have total gross, it's $100. RPP is $100, and so we divided by the number of people who paid something. So it's $10. As you can see, RPPU is higher than RPU, and that's why, because number of users that we have here, payment user, is a part of all users, and that's actually true. So this was really close to the right answer. The point is RPPU is almost always bigger than RPU, because RPPU depends on donates and RPU on all users. And actually, it's the right question. It's the right answer. The wrong only point is the word almost, but I think we can consider that this is the right answer. So I don't see the last. Let me make it like that, maybe. Not like it. Yeah, it was deleted. So yes, the right answer is it's never could happen. It's never could happen that average revenue per user will be higher than RPPU. Just think, if we have, for example, 100% of payment users, it will be 100 people, and in this case RPU will be equal to RPPU, and RPPU will be higher than RPU only in the moment when number of payments user will be higher than 100%, which is not possible, of course. So I hope it will give you some understanding how the matrix was. But the question was when RPPU is higher than RPU. Yes, it is. And so LupoFit channel, the guy from LupoFit channel answered RPPU is almost always bigger. So the wrong point was that he said it's almost. It's not almost, it's always bigger than RPU, because RPPU depends on donators, when RPU on all users. Yeah, the question was when RPPU is higher than RPU. It's never high. it's never higher. Like that. So yeah, LupoFit channel, if you're here, just write me in Telegram, maybe in chat, and I will give you and I will send you your pizza as I promised. So for today, for the game design lecture, do you have any questions for now? If you have, you can write me in personal messages in Telegram. You can write me later here. Okay. Yeah. Just a moment. Actually, alias looks really. I see. Okay, Vlad. Fine. Any questions for now? I think no. Or you would answer it. So my point was today to show how their why it's important to understand even how market works in hyper casual field, not even how the game design for specifically for hyper casual fields. Game design is really broad sphere, and mostly it's important to understand that there are a lot of different materials related to the game design, maybe some books and other thing. But my point is that I think that it's much more easy to learn on examples when you're trying to understand the how the people think, what inside the mind, and the marketability is the key point here. Then you will understand. If you understand how the mass market work, it's much more easy to understand what you can suggest them. Another case, of course, is how to work with the documentation, but I prepared it for the different lectures. I remind you that please fill the form and send a screening test. In this case, it will help us to understand how you split in the teams. Maybe next lecture will be held not online but offline, but for that we will launch a special vote about your position. Do you in Innopolis University right now or not? And in a few days we will create a chat. We will add everyone who will submit our screening test and who fill the form. So if you still want to join the IGD course, you have to fill the form, you have to send a screening task, and after the 30th of August, the deadline will be closed, and we will of course we could try to add you to the program, but it would be much more harder for us, because we will already split people on the teams. So keep it in mind, and have a nice evening. I hope it will be helpful for you. Thank you for your time. Thank you that you was here, and bye bye.